Hello everybody, welcome back to the Mermaids Cave. I know it's been a while, been busy with a lot of projects, and today I want to do something a little different. We're going to just look at a couple of different stitches and see how to expand on them, how to make the most of your stitches. I'd like to welcome all the viewers from the Pomegranate Guild who are joining us in this video. And if you like the video, please share it with your friends. Okay, let's get started. The first stitch we're going to, actually, let me start at the beginning. We're going to be doing 3 stitches. We're going to be doing a chevron stitch, a herringbone stitch, and a creighton stitch, which is this. And then we're going to be adding fly stitch, a lazy daisy, straight stitches, and French knots, and we'll also be adding some beads and sequins. So the first stitch, as I said, is the chevron stitch. This is an example of it in silk ribbon. So you can take any basic stitch, put it in silk ribbon, and it automatically looks more elegant, different, more exciting. The next one is the chevron stitch with some beads added to the tops and bottoms of the little platforms. And then on here I have beaded straight stitches. At the end over here I have a little swag of beads that's decorative. Whenever you do anything that's going to drape like that, you want to make sure that you know which way your quilt is oriented so that it hangs down. The next one we have is the chevron stitch. We have some long lazy daisies, 3 long lazy daisies in a row, and then little fly stitches to complete that look. The next one is just the chevron stitch done in a metallic thread. So again, just like with the silk ribbon, you can take a very simple stitch, do it in an exciting thread, and add a lot to your crazy quilt. Next we have little French knots added to the bars. Then I've got just lazy daisies and just some straight stitches. Here I've got a little bit of an obstacle course with these. So I've done very long, exaggerated stitches and then did a little straight stitch over that to give it some other dimension, to make it a little more exciting. And last but not least, I have here, this is a double stitch, so I've done it in one color, and then in between that stitch I've done the same thing in another color and then run a ribbon behind it. So this is a little ribbon that I just put behind it to give it a little interest. And if you're going to run a ribbon, the best thing to use is a chenille needle. You can get about a 1/2 inch ribbon into a chenille needle and then just run it under your stitches. Okay. So that's one chevron stitch, or several chevron stitches. Now I was playing around with it, and I started with just the plain chevron stitch, and then I added I added a very obtuse fly stitch. Remember in geometry you learned about acute angles and obtuse angles? Well, this is a very obtuse fly stitch here. I then added some straight stitches to that combination, and then to top it off I added some lazy daisies to that whole combination. So we've gone from just a very simple stitch all the way to a very complicated and beautiful stitch. When I first saw Crazy Quilts many, many years ago, I was very intimidated by all the stitches because I thought, oh my gosh, I know how to do embroidery, but I don't know how to do those kind of stitches. And then after I looked at it a bit and I read Penny McMorris's book on Crazy Quilts, I realized that they were just normal stitches that I already knew. It was just done in interesting combinations. So to further explore this, again, here's the chevron stitch. Here's that obtuse fly stitch done, but I've done it in the same color, but in a lighter weight thread. So the original stitch was done in a number 5 pearl cotton, and then the accent was done in number 8 pearl cotton. Moving right along, I then added my my straight stitches and my lazy daisies. I wanted to see the difference in what it looked like if it was all one color or similar colors, so that it would look like it was all done, you know, in one fluid motion. Here I have some details of other options. Again, I have a ribbon behind here just to give it a little shadow. I have some French knots and a fly stitch on this one. Here I've got a little beaded loop with a drop bead at the bottom. I've added buttons with lazy daisies. I've added another fly stitch at the top with a lazy daisy and a little swag here. And then in here I've got 3 sequins with beads. Actually, there's 2 layers of sequins. There's a large dark one and then a smaller lighter one on top of that, and then a bead to hold it down. One more chevron stitch. Now, for some crazy reason, I decided to try to do this on Aida cloth. I haven't done cross stitch in a long time. So I wanted to see what it would look like if everything were neat and straight and, you know, equidistant more or less, and how that would work out. So here is a stitch that's the chevron stitch. I did small straight stitches to make little points there. Down here I did fly stitches. I did fly stitches on either side, and then these little straight stitches to make the little pyramids, and then I did a big cross stitch across there. So then I did it all in the same thread to see what that effect would be. And I like it. It's pretty. I don't know that I would do that on a very long seam on a Crazy Quilt, because you have to go over the same line like 4 different times to do this. But I thought it was pretty, and it was kind of pushing myself to work in a way I'm not accustomed to working, as in neat and orderly and equidistant. So our second stitch that we're going to look at is the herringbone stitch, which is this stitch here. Very easy. It's an elongated cross stitch. And when you do the herringbone stitch, and I have to credit Diane Schenk. Oh gosh, I messed up her name. Diane Schneck for this. I've only known her 40 years. You put a little X over the bigger X, a little cross over the X to hold those log floats down. So here I've done it in the same color and then added more stars around it. Here I've got some heart embellishment, and I've just sewn down through the holes that exist in these. These are vintage pieces from the estate of Penny Smith. Then I've got some sequins with, here's a tip for you if you haven't already figured this out. End caps that you use in jewelry making, you know, like if you have a metal end cap on either side of a large bead, they also can be used in your Crazy Quilts. You can use them as an embellishment to hold a large bead in the middle. They have a hole in the middle. You can, you know, sew them right on. And then here at the end, I just did a little straight stitch across the end of the big X here, and then added French knots. So you can be as over the top or as subtle as you'd like to be. Okay, another herringbone stitch. This time I did, instead of doing the little X here, I did a single bead. I don't know if you can see that. I don't know if that's showing up. But there's just a single bead holding these down, and then a lazy daisy stitch, and then a clear sequin with a bead on it. I didn't want the sequins to really take over the whole thing. I just wanted them to add a little shine to the stitch. So again, it's elegant, it's simple, and it looks amazing on your Crazy Quilt. The third stitch we're going to look at is the Creighton stitch. I've said this before when I taught Crazy Quilting on a weekly basis. For some reason, the Creighton stitch was a lot of people hated it, especially if their name was Judy. So if your name is Judy, you might not like this stitch, but it's really a very pretty stitch anyway. So the Creighton stitch starts out looking like this. And on this sample, I have added fly stitches and lazy daisies. And then I went back and added, I think I just did no, I'm sorry, this is a fly stitch. But instead of just ending it with a little tacking stitch, I ended it with a lazy daisy. Now, of course, I could keep adding more things to this, and I think that's really my point in showing you these, is that if you start with a basic stitch and just kind of look at it like a puzzle, like how can I fit these pieces together? Where can I fill pieces in? It's really kind of fun, and you can just keep adding and adding and adding, and obviously if you do it in a bunch of different colors, it's going to give a very different effect than if you do it all in one color or all in one weight of thread. You can change up your weights. So that's an option. Now this was actually a mistake. I started doing this, and as you can see, this little fan is on top of just the Creighton stitch itself, whereas this fan is actually on top of a fly stitch that's on top of the Creighton stitch. And I didn't realize that I had done that until I, sat back and looked at it. I go, oh man, I can't continue because I have all these fly stitches here. So I thought, I know, this is just one of those creative flaws that I talk about. There's no mistakes in Crazy Quilting, only creative flaws. So I redid it, doing that on purpose. And I kind of like it. Now this one I just did freehand, as like the way I would do it on a Crazy Quilt. So it's a little wonky. It's not perfect, but that's okay. And this isn't a number 5 pearl cotton, so it's very heavy looking. And I did the stitch, and then I did I think in cross stitch, this is called, or canvas work, this is called a Smyrna stitch. So it's just 4, crossways to make an 8-pointed stitch, basically. And these are straight stitches with French knots at the bottom. Okay, so then I thought I really like this. I don't think I've ever done that. Can't remember ever doing it on a quilt before. I really like it, but it needs to at least look better. So I did it on Aida cloth just to see what it would look like if it was actually nice and straight, and and I really like this. I really do. And I used not an variegated, but an overdyed thread from Karen Threads, the watercolors. So that's why it changes like from purple to green. And then I added the fly stitches and the straight stitches with the French knots and the little Smyrna stitch. And then I added beads, a line of beads in here to give it a little more texture. And I was really, really happy with how that came out. So it wasn't it didn't happen right away. I had to go through this and this and, look at the mistake and say, okay, what do I really want to have happen here? So again, that's what we've done. That's what I wanted to show you about maximizing your stitches. I also have here a Crazy Quilt that I made in 1997. I know what year it was because I had the date on it. And let's see, here is this is a herringbone stitch with beads attached to it. I'm going to just turn this around. Here is another herringbone stitch with lazy daisies on it. Here I have the Creighton stitch, and this is 2 Creighton stitches done like mirror imaged, and then with little crosses in between and little flowery things on either side. And this quilt is velvet, so I used a lot of number 5 pearl cotton so it would show up. Here's another Creighton stitch. On one side I just did lazy daisies, and on the other side I did a fly stitch with three straight stitches in there. So I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope this has inspired you to kind of expand your stitch repertoire. You don't have to know a million different stitches to have an interesting crazy quilt. You just have to be willing to experiment and mix and match lots of different weights of threads and colors and add some beads and sequins and just have a good time, because that's what it's really all about. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and share with your friends. And that's all for now from the Mermaids Cave. Bye-bye.